Hi, this is the Drupal usability meeting for 2019, February 26th. And we'll at least talk about some media stuff, which I don't have more details about.
Sorry, go ahead, Sean.
I could share my screen right away.
I think we have 3 issues we want to go into, if nobody else shows up. One of them is a wording bike shed. The other is a thing that we want to land soon and needs usability sign-off. I think the other thing is needing UX and accessibility sign-off.
Shall we start with the grid table views thing? So this is issue 2981044, and it's about having a grid and a table link to switch between different displays of the same view for the media library. And I can show that also in a working environment. So you open the media library, or you have the add form and the media grid display, which we had before. And we have now added a table display link to show the same results as a table. And this is mostly for accessibility, to address the fact that the grid doesn't show all the information as well. Yeah, so when you select stuff and you apply, it remembers what you have selected. When you apply filters, it also remembers that when you switch between the two. And the sorts should work as well. So in a nutshell, that's it. Any feedback on this so far?
So this is not entirely new. We already have that switch, don't we? Or does that only exist when it's on a full page rather than a mobile?
We have the media overview. I'm not sure if that's what you meant, but
I think it is.
Yeah, here you can switch as well. Only we don't have these nice links for the modal, or we have at least less space. So
this was already there. I'm pretty sure.
This was already there.
Right.
Exact.
So we're just adding this same toggle to the modal.
And I suppose since it's in a modal, it's just an Ajax refresh. It's not a full page reload.
Correct.
Yes, and I think in the future we probably want to have the same UX for the general overview, but that's a separate issue. We wanted to have it solved in the modal first.
So what's the question? Just do we like it? Is there room for improvement? Do we see anything wrong?
Is it? Yeah. I mean, do you like it? Can we
remove the tag needs accessibility needs usability review?
Yeah. Can we take this to the bank and cash it?
I mean, I think the show as is repetitive. I think it's just simpler if you just say grid and table, and it's more consistent with the tabs that you already have set up. That's my only. And people are familiar with the icons, so that's not. Yeah, those are pretty standard icons for grid and table. Keep in mind, we could still have the accessibility when someone goes to it to say show as grid, but the labeling could just be grid and table, or that's my take on it.
In the designs, we didn't have the words at all.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if I can remove that real quick.
I mean, yeah, I'm fine without the words, but I was assuming that there was a reason that someone wanted the labeling.
Yeah, let's see what happens if we just do. Oh, that's not. Yeah, well, we could remove the text. Let me just do it like this. But when we have it like this, the icons kind of, I don't know, they don't draw as much attention, I guess.
To me, that gets lost.
I agree. They would need a hover. Then you're getting a whole UX. They need hover states and like more a button feel to it. Going back to just the default, just the show as is repetitive, and I mean, yeah, it's all new patterns.
Let me just try to fix that while we look at it. See what happened. Oh, wait, I was too fast.
Hey, accessibility. We're gonna get some feedback.
So if we could just have it like this.
And what's cool about that approach is in the local tasks that you have for the media, main view, it's easy to add icons to that. That's not a hard thing to do. I mean, I know that's a new ticket, but I'm saying like this gets us close to getting consistency because you can just add icons next to the grid and table attribute, table local tasks really easily.
Okay.
Let's say, Andrew, you got to let him weigh in a little bit on this.
I'm just catching up on exactly what issue we were looking at.
This is the issue where we add the links to display the media library results or the media library as a table or as a grid view.
Yeah.
And in the patch right now, we have the links with the labels show as grid and show as table. And the initial feedback was maybe the show as is a little bit repetitive and we could remove that.
I agree with that. The brevity is good. There's some other aspect to that patch which was looking at what the announcement would be to a screen reader after you've switched to one, and we were looking at the brevity of that as well, making sure we don't make everything just too verbose.
Okay.
But yeah, I like getting rid of the show as well.
I believe in that issue there was an accessibility concern that was needing product manager feedback as well. Seeing as how we have both product managers on the call, what was the story with that?
Yes, that was a tab order. So by default, the views template has the header above the exposed filters. So if you now start tabbing through, and I think you can see it if you watch really closely, I'm tabbing right now, and you go to the links first, and then you go to the exposed filters. And because the views template can't be overridden from the module, we can't fix this until the module gets stable, and we are allowed to add templates to the 17. So right now we have basically, and the tab order is not good for accessibility because you are supposed to have the same tab order as the visual order on the page, if I understood correctly. So we now have basically two choices: or we change the design until we get to the stable state and make sure that these links are above the filters, or we fix the order in the template when we get to stable. And for now, we accept the fact that the visual order is not the same as the tab order. So basically, that's the two choices we have.
Yeah, so we need PM decision on that before we can proceed with this. But otherwise, I think that's it for this issue. If no one else has any other feedback, we can move on to the next thing we got.
Yeah, so
I was distracted in another window. You need PM feedback on the tab order and stuff, or
yeah, so the tab order right now is you have the add form first, then the links, and then the exposed form. And the visual order is the add form, the exposed filters, and then the links. And we can't fix that until we can add a views template to 7, which we can only do when it's stable. So we have two choices: or we move the links above the exposed filters, which is not as we designed it, and then we have to go back and switch that later when we get to stable, or we leave this as is for now and we fix it, and we accept that the visual order is not the same as the like the tab order until we get to stable. So yeah.
and we can't add a views template prior to it being stable because we can't add experimental-ish code in stable parts of core. Is that the problem?
I believe so, yes.
And there's no way to add it from the media library module, like as an extension to views?
Well,
Modules can't override themes.
Oh,
yeah, so we have to do basically our own theme function, and
Which would technically be introducing API, so I don't think that's a solution we would want to go with.
I don't know. I mean, it is a really bad problem. So if we don't do the pretty show as grid and show as table thing, and instead we just make those local tasks or something, like we saw in the previous thing, that would get around the problem, but it would make this a lot more clunky and awful, right?
Well, it would not be as designed, so I could just simply move the links above the exposed filters. Like that's technically not an issue. It's just that might have usability implications, because now the links are kind of related to the results you're seeing, and if you move them further away,
yeah, the way they are, like the way they visually look right now, that's definitely the way you want them. You don't want to make the viewport higher, especially since it's in a modal and it's already limited.
Yeah, so yeah, it's I like it both sucks basically.
Andrew, since you're on the call, and hi, welcome to the call. Tab order matching visual order, is that an A compliance? Is that an AA compliance? Do you know off the top of your head? Otherwise, I can certainly look it up.
It's kind of split between two criterion at level A and level AA. And so what level A is that you've got to have a tabbing order. Yeah, it's level A. What level A says is you've got to have a tabbing order that makes sense. And what we've got here is that the DOM order doesn't match what we're seeing visually because there's some kind of CSS override. So if you have that here, today's the first day I've actually seen them all on one line with the because typically I've got a narrower browser window. And if you make the browser window narrower, you'll see that the show as grid goes underneath the filters, and there it becomes even more jarring because you don't just have this. You've got this different up and down jump as you go through the focus order. So that's not a. It's technically that's a level A problem, but in practice, it's not a complete brick wall barrier. It's just a really kind of frustrating kind of thing because when you're tabbing, you end up accidentally overshooting what you were intending to hit, and then you have to kind of hold shift down and reverse your steps a little bit. It's not a brick wall barrier for a sighted keyboard user. It's just a bit jarring.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. So
as I understand the problem is that here we've just got a view, and views is putting the exposed filters there, and these switcher grid table links afterwards. So, and that's just what we get from views. And so if we wanted to override that in the DOM, if that's the visual appearance we want, then we should have these two links afterwards in the DOM. Filters first, then the switcher links. And so if we wanted to do that, as I understand it, we can override that in a theme template. But we've kind of got this chicken and egg problem. We can't mark the module stable if there's a known level A WebCAG failure. So that's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. So what I think we can do is just say there's no way around that. So just accept that we've got a failure when we mark the module as stable. But before we mark the module as stable, we make sure there is a major follow-up issue to go and do a template override.
I would be comfortable with that, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was worried about being a level A. Like, we're trying to achieve AA compliance at least. So if we're failing on an A, that's really bad. However, it is that justification makes sense where it's like it's bad, but it's not in a, you literally can't get to show as grid and show as table. You just get to them first before the part that you're probably going to go to more often, which is the name field.
Yeah, we can get that through the gate. We've just kind of got to have someone standing at the gate watching it.
Okay, if you're cool with that, then that sounds good to me.
So what we'll do there is we can accept that level A failure and mark them, and that won't be a blocker to marking the module as stable. It has a couple of bigger problems that we should make as actual blockers. But then after we've done, before we mark it as stable, we make a major issue to say we must have a template override to fix that. And so we've marked the module as stable, but the template override can be a release blocker for, release candidate or whatever.
We have an issue already to move the CSS that's specific for 7 to the 17. I think this is kind of related. So we should make that issue and just make sure that we also have an issue to mark the module as stable and make sure that we link those issues in there.
So if I can just summarize what we just came up with so we are all hearing it. Andrew and Angie have agreed that although this is a major failure for WCAG compliance, because of views and the stability stuff just being what it is, we're going to mark the modules. We're going to commit it this way with the problem. Before we do that, we'll file a postponed major follow-up. That's a post-stable, possible critical issue, potentially critical, to fix this when we mark the module stable and move all the styling and theming and all that into 7.
We could have a patch for that ready.
Yeah.
When we mark the module stable. So.
Yeah, that sounds. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, that's what I said. You've stated it in shorter terms than I did.
All right, cool. So it sounds like we're in agreement on that.
Perfect.
Andrew, would you be able to write a comment to that effect on the issue, just so it's obvious it came from you and not like, we swear Andrew told us this?
Yeah. Well, this is a public thing, isn't it? So we'll...
It is a public thing, but then people have to go back and watch it. And,
Okay. Yeah. Well, if we can grab the link.
Yeah, we can certainly do it. And if you didn't say it, it's obvious you could come back and say I didn't say that at all. But just if you have time, that would be.
We could also summarize it if that helps everybody.
I love remarks on air. I can't say I didn't say it.
Okay, perfect.
We have a small accessibility bike shed. I think we need to open about the name of the dialogue.
Yeah, so
which
now
is an accessibility issue.
Andrew here. Let's because when I was testing this, actually blindfolded with a screen reader just to get more feeling about the accessibility of the media library, I found it confusing that when I clicked the link that the dialogue is called media library, but it didn't exactly tell me what to expect. I guess you could maybe I don't know, automatically understand that you are supposed to select stuff here, but I thought, why not just make the label a little more explicit of the dialogue? So I proposed to have it was select items from the media library. And I think Andrew's feedback, maybe just tell me when I say something that's not true, but to make it a little briefer and just say select media items. And I personally think that the concept of the media library is pretty important. So we should at least have the words media library in the title. And maybe that's not shorter, but I think for training purposes and when writing documentation, it might help. But I am completely comfortable with being wrong. So
I'll agree with that. I think that's fine. I'll sort of like take that comment 3 bike shed. I'll retract that. I think it's just I think it's always worth saying, what is the purpose of the dialogue? Because the dialogue is always a question, right? And to me, the question was select items, but then your view is that it's important to know where those items are coming from. I think that is actually a good idea now that I've read it, because when we look inside one of these tabs, we've got the media library items that already exist, but above that you've got the add files upload, and so there is a risk that you might hit that and realize that you might make a mistake and think that you are supposed to upload a file here because that's the very first thing you encounter. So I think that having select items from the media library, actually saying that out in full, is probably a good thing. I'll go with that. It's not really an accessibility issue unless you're trying to tell sighted users one thing and screen reader users another. That's what I would say would be a bad. That's something we should avoid. But I'll go with your suggestion.
Cool. Is there any other feedback on this? If everybody thinks this looks good, we can just take the usability review tag off and land this quick.
I do have a couple comments about this. Just for the media library widget in general, the biggest issue is that when you press the add media button, focus isn't moving to the dialogue. And we've seen this before on some other core dialogues. That's the biggest one to fix, rather than say what the title of the dialogue is. But once you're in the dialogue, now that we've got these vertical tabs, they all start with the same add files. So if you're in the images tab, you've got add files, and the allowed file types are PNGs and GIFs and JPEGs. But if you went to audio, you'd get the same field, add files. I wonder if it could relabel that as add image file or add audio file, for the media type.
we sure can.
I think that might even go in the media entity bundle config. I don't know.
We have a label for it. I don't think we have like capitalized and the non-capitalized versions, and I also don't think we have plural versions of the labels, but we do have what we have right here. So we can have like add image files and add audio files. It's no problem.
And that plain HTML widget's eventually going to be replaced with a new drop zone one, isn't it?
That's the plan, yes.
Yeah.
And in that one, we probably make the label visually hidden, but still there.
Cool.
But I will make sure that we get another issue for that specific thing. And
Okay.
so this in itself is probably not an accessibility issue anymore, and just a usability improvement, if I understand you correctly.
Yeah, I'll update the accessibility issue for that.
Okay. Is there feedback on this from a usability perspective?
So what
Nothing?
specifically are we reviewing from a usability perspective?
The label of the dialogue.
Yeah, whether that title looks good and makes sense.
I like the new one.
Sweet. Cut and print.
Perfect.
Although, oh god, I said that. Technically, you can either add a new file or select items from the media library. Multi-purpose thing. So maybe we should keep it the way it is. Hold on. Let me go to the issue and read the comments that are already there so I don't rehash a conversation that has already happened. No.
Well, there wasn't that much. Like the thing I noticed most is when you are using a screen reader and you are not able to visually see what happens
Yep.
when you click the Add Media button. That's when you really need a clearer title for the dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
What I found, at least. That being said, yeah, I think sighted users could also have a better title, but select or add items from the media library. Yeah.
Well, but the problem is if you actually want to label it around the task is add new media or select existing items from the media library. And now you've written a novel in your title of your thing.
Yeah, and I also think like the main purpose of the thing is to select, and that you can add new stuff to eventually select it.
We did establish as a basic assumption that people are going to add way more than they select. And I think I still think that still holds true.
Yeah, but the purpose of this dialogue is not to add stuff to the media library. Like you can add stuff to eventually select it.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
I mean, I think people will also interact with it to add things, but
well, they don't have a choice, right? This is the only way to add. Like, if you want to upload a picture on your desktop to a node, you have to go through the media library now, correct?
well, I mean, you could also go to the like stupid media add form and fill it out somewhere else, and then come back to the node, select it. But that's the long way around.
Right, but I think Angie is right here. The content editor doesn't care about the media library. The content editor wants to add an image to this page. And whether that's a file being added from the local computer or a file that's already on the site from the media library, the key thing about this dialogue is that we're adding images or we're adding files to the page or to the node or to the something.
But aren't you adding a file to select it?
No, not. I mean, that's how it works under the hood, but no. All I'm trying to do as a content author is I want to add this picture of my beautiful trip to Tofino to my article. That's what I'm trying to do. The fact that people adds it to a media library and auto selects it for me is an implementation detail, which I don't care about. Because the
select media to add. Select items to add.
Yeah. It would be like add or select items from the media library. I guess that would be the shortest way you could say it and be accurate. But that's still quite long. And media library sums it up nicely. So I guess I'm curious, like where is the desire to change it from something short and descriptive to something longer? And do we do it elsewhere in other dialogues? Like when we pop open a views dialogue, does it say select one or more exposed filters, or does it just say exposed filters? Because basically we should do whatever we do elsewhere in core, I think. Can you see that right now, actually? Could you pop into Views UI and just make it? I know, well, okay. Views UI is horrible, but that's the only thing I can think of off the top of my head that has dialogue.
I'm also not sure where we can find
Well, just go to structure, views, add new view, and I don't know where something, or we can edit one. It doesn't matter.
Add filter criteria.
Yeah, add filter. Any of those would do it. Yeah. So add a filter criteria.
Add fields.
Oh, it is called add filter criteria. Interesting.
Right. So there's
the verb then. Okay. So I
So
would,
what
I would
about-
honestly just say add or select media then.
And this button does even say add and configure.
Mhm.
So maybe then add or select items from media library.
Oh God, we don't like.
I mean, I like add or select.
translators.
I liked add or select media. I think that's
Yeah,
short
add
enough
or
and
select
clear enough.
media is what I would do. The fact that it's a media library is an internal term that we use to describe what this is, but for normal people, they don't care. So I think
But-
add or select media would be the way I would label it.
But isn't the media library something that we want to use in documentation and or training people to understand the concept that once you add something there, that all other users can also see that media library and interact with your stuff?
Yeah, but we can call it the media library and documentation without labeling it as such in the user interface.
Yeah,
Because
documentation.
we're not introduced, like if this was Views UI, we'd have to be very specific because Views is a weird fucking Drupal thing. But a media library is not a weird Drupal thing. That is like CMS 101 stuff. So I don't think we need to be that worried about people not understanding what they're seeing here. But I could be wrong.
Well, I'm happy to be wrong about this as well. So maybe add or select media is like the maybe it is better.
I mean, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
That add or select media would be my formal recommendation. However, I'm happy if we still want to further bike shed it, that's fine. But that, to me, it matches the Views UI, which I know we hate the Views UI, but whatever. The other place we're using dialogues that I can think of, it matches the format we're using there. It tells people that they're looking at media. And then in documentation, media library, it like a library is a general word, which means a collection of stuff. So I think it's fine to call it a media library in documentation, even if we don't identify it as such here. But I'm also happy to be told to shut the hell up and for someone else to have a consent or dissenting opinion.
So I've got there is an accessibility thing that this has made me think about. So I would go with what Angie just said there. The idea that we should look at the existing dialogues in core and try and have consistency with them is covered by WebCAG. So like where we went there to find a view and we went in there and found the filter criteria and found that it began with the verb add. And so if we try and maintain consistency with that, we're going to stick with the idea that this thing is going to have a verb at the start of it. So add or select or one of those. And the WebCAG criteria that this comes under are both at level A in the perceivable, understandable section. And it's one of them's called consistent navigation, and the other one is called consistent identification. I think it's the latter that this is most right with. What we're saying is that we're following the same kind of format for our dialogue titles and our buttons throughout. You know, we always start with a verb, or we always kind of explain what the task is rather than just what the thing you're seeing is.
I like it.
Yeah, I'm +1 that. I think add or select media is really our best option for all the reasons stated before.
Perfect. Then
Bike shed is now closed.
yeah.
I'm so sorry. I'm like, it looks
No.
great. Hold on a minute. Let me actually think about this.
we made it better, so then it's okay.
Okay. So I think we had another thing, but I see Ben Mullins is here and he probably has a layout thing he wants to talk about. So instead of monopolizing the rest of the time, maybe we should just hand it over to him.
And there's also the issue that Derek raised, which I'm prepared to demo now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So media will gracefully bow out.
Yes. No, I think we had enough to at least move forward for another week. So thank you.
Thank you. Can we move to Ben?
I can stop sharing.
Is it me, Ben?
Yep.
All right. Excellent. Okay, so the first one that it needs UX review. It's issue 2936501. I'll post that in the chat as well. So hopefully this is pretty cut and dry, and that's my baby in the background. They so this is something that was discovered as it was being built, but it was just postponed till later. What happens is that if someone is overriding a layout for an entity, and they revert to defaults, once they submit that revert, if it redirects them back to the entity form, it automatically starts a new temp store. So technically they haven't reverted. The solution to that was if you revert to defaults after submission, it now redirects to viewing the entity instead. And as a result, you're not in edit mode. It doesn't create a new temp store and you've truly reverted. So based on that behavior, we just want to run it by the UX meeting to see if there are any usability concerns before we could mark it as being usability reviewed.
My initial, I have to look at it. I'm like, how does node revision reverting work in core? Does it, when you say revert a revision, does it go to the edit form or does it go to the view?
Oh, this is actually reverting the layout, not a revision.
No, I understand that, but we're trying to keep consistent patterns. So when you say to someone, okay, here's how to revert, what is the default action we're doing in core for nodes? You can revert. You can say revert to a previous revision. I think it goes to the view of the node, not the edit form. You know, like it just said, and there's a message at the top. I'd have to check it really quick.
If that is what it does, that would match what this patch does, which is good.
Yeah, I can quickly try on my local just to quickly do it. Give me a second. It's funny. It's not something you do every day, so it takes a second.
Oh yeah. No reason to store it in your accessible memory.
Revision, edit. Yeah, I'm not even. My local is having a problem creating revisions. There we go. Let's see. I got one. And that's a killer. I can share my screen really quickly. It's sticking you. There's no pattern in core basically. So if I have a bunch of revisions here, and if I go to revert, it keeps me in the revision UI. So there's no pattern here. It just gives you a message has been reverted, and its state keeps you where it returns to here.
I think the rationale for that is because it's actually creating a new revision of your old revision, and so it's keeping you in the place where something changed.
Yeah. No, so you can have this indication. Yeah.
Someone is rocking out in a tin can.
Yeah. Here, whoop, I'll lower my.
So does that translate into a specific concern or reservation about the solution that is in place? And I can share my screen and kind of show it in action.
Could you do that? That's just a little easier to visualize.
Yes, yeah. That's a big pile of words otherwise. Just a moment. I think I have it here. Okay.
I already have the issue open if that helps.
We are a visual group, the UX people.
Yeah, okay, that's reasonable. All right, so it is visible?
Yep.
Everyone? All right. So
that's an awesome background you got there.
Yeah. So basically, when you enable entity-specific overrides of a bundle's layout, by virtue of just going to the layout tab, it creates a new instance in the temp store, and you automatically have unsaved changes, even if you've done nothing. So the revert to defaults allows you to go back to the bundle default. and you confirm. And this is with the patch applied. Took me back to the view. Prior to the patch, it would, after submission, it would take you back to layout. But by virtue of being in layout, it actually creates a new temp store. And so
That's
technically, it's not defaulted. You've started a new instance. So the solution
Yeah,
was
I think that's fine. I could go either way on this because, you know, on the one hand, basically what I'm going to want to know immediately after I press that button is what the hell did this just do?
You know, as you're saying that, I realized there's a conspicuous absence of a confirmation message of some sort.
Yeah, that might be good. Because this is a destructive action that you're doing, or potentially destructive. And I guess I believe in views and other places where we revert things. Well, we just saw it with the node form. So yeah, we probably should have a confirm form there. But I guess, yeah, the main thing, whoever presses this button, even if there is a confirm form, is going to want to then know what did this just do to my site. And so I could go either way on them being redirected.
I didn't notice it, but here's the.
Okay, cool, yeah. But I mean visually. So like, I think this is a better pattern than the node one. We might want to talk about making the node one different at some point. Not obviously as part of your initiative, but because if I'm redirected to the view, then if I just made a terrible mistake, not like I can undo it, which is a whole separate problem, but if I just made a terrible mistake, at least I know that because I'm looking at this and the image is up in the upper right corner and the text is down at the bottom or whatever, you know what I mean? Like I would be able to see, oh shit, that was the wrong thing to do, and then quickly go in and fix it. Versus if it redirected me back to the layout screen, I think that's less obvious because you're looking at like kind of an abstraction of what this does. So I think that makes sense to me. Like what you've just shown makes sense, especially if it gets us out of an infinite loop of tab stores.
Yeah. It says, there are some actual behavioral benefits to it in addition to technical. That's great.
Can you see the layout tab again?
Sure. All right.
This reminds me of something we discussed a few months ago. After you add an item to the media library, where should you end up? And at that time, we looked and we sort of terribly failed any sort of consistency. Like if you looked at what happened with nodes and with taxonomy terms and with media items, you already had 4 different patterns.
And then layout is kind of a different paradigm too. So it's tricky. The trade-off of adding an additional pattern versus applying something that may be very inappropriate for it.
Yeah, there's kind of no right and wrong answer to this, really. I mean, there's say like for instance in the media library when we were saying where do you end up after you've done that, there's questions about which page do you end up on, which is what we're looking at here with this layout one. But then with the media library one, you get down to the nitty-gritty of where exactly is your keyboard focus ending up, and that can be a really strange question as well. Like in the layout builder, after you've added a block and you've gotten rid of the off canvas that's been finished with, your keyboard focus goes back to the layout, and deciding exactly where the keyboard focus is going is a really strange one. But there's no real right or wrong answer to it. But what's more important is, does the user understand where they've arrived? Versus is the user likely to be disorientated after that? There's a strange thing about layout tab is that we kind of have 2 variations on a cancel button, effectively, as discards the changes we've currently made, but also the kind of brute force back to revert to default. Those are both kind of in the cancel category.
Yeah. Cancel category, yes.
Yeah, they're kind of two different versions of a cancel. So like if you're looking at the layout tab, this would be the layout tab for a node where we see the 3 buttons. But if you're looking at the layout tab for a content type, you'd only see the 2 buttons, right?
Right.
You what you're editing is the defaults. But so here you only see you see the 3 buttons because it's a node where overriding the defaults is permitted. And something that might be able to help here is actually giving people a clue about whether it's ever been overridden at all. Like I've got a node and I go to edit the layout. Is there anything? There's nothing here which tells me that I'm currently using the defaults from the content type versus, oh, I'm currently using some overrides that I did last week. So
right.
I don't even know whether to press revert to defaults because I don't know if I'm using the defaults already.
Yeah, I'm going to weigh in on. I have issues with just the language. Override is a technical term. Do non-technical people know what an override is? They know what customize is. I'm sorry to bike shed on it. But I also threw the word override into Google Translate, and it doesn't translate that well when you go back and forth from Spanish to English. Actually, what happens, what I mean going back and forth, is you take override, translate it to Spanish, and then take the translation and translate it back to English. It translates into the word cancel, which isn't the right. I'm just kind of illustrating. Is override a common term for non-technical users to back?
I think, yeah, and that's probably a good item to add to the terminology issue. So I think the observation has merit and deserves discussion.
Sorry, go ahead. There's an issue that I was just looking at. I'm going to post it right here, which has some, 2988970, which has some level of overlap with this, where it's showing messages when you're, say, editing an override. It says, it doesn't use the term override, but it's showing messages to end users to explain what it is they're actually looking at, or at least inform them what they're looking at. I was going to work on that, but I got sidetracked.
I think override comes from views. That's where it's used heavily. That's the term. That's not a site. It's a site builder tool, but it's a very technical tool.
Yeah, I would suggest look at the patch I just posted. It's the message, when you're editing the overrides, it says you are editing the layout for this article, for example, and then it gives you a link to edit the template for all articles instead. And then when you're editing the template, it just says you are editing the layout template for all articles. So it doesn't use the term override in the UI. I just thought I'd mention that as kind of a corollary to what we're talking about here.
That makes sense to me. Yeah.
So in the scope of this specific ticket, which just changes where you're directed after confirming you'd like to revert to defaults, are there any specific concerns with that functionality, or would that specific functionality be considered having passed UX review?
I feel bad bringing up these things, but I just want to throw out if we look at your screen, you have save layout, discard changes, revert to defaults. The primary button, if you were thinking about save and reset, is the save layout. Usually you want, in our UX, we'll make save blue, and then the resets are grayed out because that's the save layout's the primary action here for most users.
Yeah, that's because Bartik doesn't have a style for primary in this case, and we're seeing these buttons using the front end themes styles.
I mean, yeah, it's I know. I mean, we could turn discard changes and revert to defaults to hyperlinks, but then they start floating around pretty, ambiguously. Do we have a red link in Bardic? Like where it's a button link that's a danger? Even though this isn't such a dangerous thing there's someone doing. Yeah. Yeah, sorry to bike shed on that one too.
I got kicked out due to the 24-hour rule.
I love that thing. Okay, so can we summarize the feedback so far? Because I feel like I was fine with what I saw, but then a whole bunch of good points got raised by Jacob, but I'm just not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say I'm fine too with what we saw. I think the flow of what we saw is totally fine. And I think we're running into just design issues with the Bardic theme, which we can't resolve here, where a primary button would solve a UX issue here, which is a separate issue.
Okay, so within the scope of this specific issue, things seem fine. It sounds like, but there were many valid points brought up that if they do not currently have issues, may warrant the creation of them if they are in fact actionable. Does that sound good? Like a reasonable summary?
I'm good with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. And there is a second issue that has been discussed in the past. It's 2938182, and this is the design intuitive affordances for illustrating which parts of the page are editable. There was a very appealing design that was agreed upon, and then once I attempted implementing it, we ran into a pretty major technical hurdle because unfortunately the design assumed that the tabs are always adjacent to the content area, and that's not the case. So I think, in fact, the screenshot, the breadth. So it was an outline outlining the tab and then to the content. But for example, Umami has breadcrumbs, and breadcrumbs break that outline. So there was some discussion, and one of the ideas was to just outline the local task and the content area, so they both had individual outlines. And I decided to just try it as a patch to make sure that it was technically feasible and use that as the mock-up. So I'm definitely not married to the idea, but it does work on a technical level. We won't be surprised by it. So that's a lot of new information, but if people have thoughts or concerns, I'd be interested in doing them.
I did see this in the last couple days. I guess it does look kind of dorky with the layout. Sorry, this is going all over the place. But if you could, Benji, could you go to like the second to the last comment or wherever the last screenshot is? Not that one. That's how we wanted it to look. That one is fine, or any of those. It does look kind of dorky with the button in an outline and the other thing in an outline. I guess what I would say is I totally get why it can't be, like, if you scroll down, sorry, Benji, one more comment. No, this one. That screenshot just above Fenna Proxima's comment. The second screenshot there does a good job of illustrating why we can't do it the way that it's in the mocks. But I guess given that we're going to have a weird separation either way, I would just remove the outline from the layout tab, personally. And just put the blue outline of the content area. That would be also similar to how Quick Edit does it. And I think one of the thinking behind using this pattern is that we already use it elsewhere in core. So whatever accessibility or other problems it has are no worse than the existing problems we already have in core, and therefore it's like utilize same pattern, not get blocked. That was kind of thinking. So is it, I assume, I don't know a lot about CSS, but the part about CSS I do know is that it is possible to have only that second outline and not the first one, correct?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So that would be my recommendation, because otherwise it looks very jarring and different from other things. So that would be my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think the term dorky that you coined was
I don't know that I coined that. I feel like I've been calling it my entire life, but you know.
applied, I guess. Yeah.
I could also go for awkward if that's okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I like your point about it being an existing pattern. So if something needs solving, it would be solved in many places.
That was my thinking, but other people's opinions, especially Andrew, since one of the reasons we're going this route instead was for accessibility concerns.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the screenshots between, say, comment 20 and well, the umami and the Bartik ones anyway. But a good example of what I said about the original idea was that we were going to gray these out with some kind of shadow thing. Is that, you know, I made the point that things like the breadcrumbs might not be part of the editable layout, but they are still something that a site builder uses a lot of the time just to get around the site they're building. Is what this really shows us is that the breadcrumb can be in a very different place between, say, Bartik and umami, and it's actually, we've got the breadcrumb between the primary tabs and the content area. And so that's another thing that breaks it up that we see in that umami one. This this doesn't present any particular accessibility problem in the design we've got. If we said that we weren't going to highlight the tab, we were just going to put the blue line around the whole thing. The only accessibility problem there is going to be is that if the blue is defined by Layout Builder module, then it's not guaranteed to be perceivable against every front-end theme. Like if someone had a blue background on their website, then that blue outline wouldn't really be doing much.
Yeah, and that the reconciling the fact that the layout builder interface interacts with any contributed theme is kind of a larger discussion topic that has come up a lot, and I believe that's going to be discussed further post stable. But currently the scope is umami and the core themes. We'll make sure the contrast is fine, but yeah, your concern is one that is definitely known, and I think will be addressed at some point, but probably not for 8.7.
Yeah, it's a wider issue that affects quick edit and contextual links and stuff like that too.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But then isn't it the responsible
to just reuse the pattern? Because then it's like, well, we're not making anything worse. We're just, it's like another instance of the same pattern.
And isn't it the responsibility of the theme then to override the colors?
That's right.
Yep. Okay, so I think I can take from this that the approach of highlighting the editable content area or of outlining it sounds good, and not outlining the local task, and that should be sufficient for the user, and it adheres to existing patterns, which means it's less of a perilous rabbit hole than if we went off on something new. So
I'm going to adopt the term perilous rabbit hole. That's what I take away from this call. But yes, I believe that is the summary.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, so that takes care of the issues I want to run by. I appreciate all the feedback.